Hello everyone, so this is the video 2 that I was talking about doing, and it's mostly, or at least half, about why Jews cover their hair, what the rabbis teach. And I also want to touch just a couple little other points that other people have made about head covering that aren't exactly right and some that are, and what my interpretation of those are. Okay, so first I'm going to go over what the rabbis teach, and how I know is because I've listened to the rabbis to see what they actually say, not to hear what the Jewish women say, which they tend to say that it's for modesty. They tend to say it's because it's a sign of being married. That's mainly what they say, and they say that it's an elevation of status and their crown. So those are the things that they say. And I'm going to read the verses that the rabbis have mentioned, and then I'm going to talk about a few other things, like I said. So Exodus is one that they use as far as, because it's not just head covering for men, head covering for women also. So 1 Corinthians 11 mentions men and their head covering. The Jewish men, they have explanations for things. This isn't really, the rabbis, of course, they read from here in Exodus. So as part of the men's head covering, the things that they mention in Exodus is what the priestly garments were. Now we know that in Bible times, men and women both covered their heads. However, they would use different materials, different collars, different cutting, different adornments on their head coverings to make it either more feminine or to leave it masculine or plain or holy, depending on, if they were priests or if they were, just regular men, not priests. Okay, so I wanted to read just a little bit of that too, because that's part of 1 Corinthians 11. So that you can understand that it's not saying that the men aren't supposed to cover their hair, because the priests did cover their hair. But it was talking about putting on and taking off of the veil. So it says the priest's garments. And this is God talking. So you would know that God didn't say that the priests are not supposed to cover their head. They weren't supposed to cover their head with their veil, with their head covering. The women's was called a veil. The men, I think it was just part of their cloak, or maybe they also did call it a veil, but it's just different, as I said. Anyway, it says, "Then bring near to you Aaron your brother and his sons with him from among the people of Israel to serve me as priests. Aaron and Aaron's sons, Nadab and Abihu, Eleazar and Ithamar. And you shall make holy garments for Aaron your brother, for glory and for beauty." So they were supposed to be attractive to the eyes, appealing to the eyes, but not like a, attraction like a man and woman, just to call your attention to it. So it'll be beautiful. You shall speak to all the skillful, whom I have filled with the spirit of skill, and they make Aaron's garments to consecrate him for my priesthood. These are the garments that they shall make: a breastpiece, an ephod, a robe, a coat of checker work, a turban, and a sash. So you see, God told the priests to wear a turban on their head. And he also said for them to wear a robe. Okay, I had to get the bell quieted a little bit that they're playing with. Okay, it says, "They shall make holy garments for Aaron your brother and his sons to serve me as priests. They shall receive gold, blue, and purple, and scarlet yarns, and fine twined linen. And they shall make the ephod of gold, of blue, and purple, and scarlet yarns, and of fine twined linen, and skillfully worked." And now I'm going to skip all the way back to, let's see, where exactly? Yes, the turban. So now I'm going to skip all the way back up here to the talking about the turban again, because the rest is the breastplate and all that. You can read that. Oh, did I forget to tell you what chapter we're in? We're in Exodus chapter 28. So Exodus chapter 28, it starts with the breast piece in verse 4. These are the garments that they shall make: a breast piece, an ephod, a robe, a coat of checker work, a turban, and a sash. That was verse 4. And then I read to you verse 5, and then I read about the scarlet yarns and fine twined linen, and then I read verse 6. And they shall make the ephod of gold, of blue and purple, scarlet yarns, fine twined linen, skillfully worked. And so then he's going to talk about each thing that were mentioned here. And then I'm going to skip to the more explanation about the turban. Verse 36 of Exodus chapter 28. And you shall make a plate of pure gold and engrave on it, like the engraving of a signet, holy to the Lord. And you shall fasten it on the turban by a cord of blue. It shall be on the front of the turban. It shall be on Aaron's forehead. And Aaron shall bear any guilt from the holy things that the people of Israel consecrate as their holy gifts. It shall regularly be on his forehead, that they may be accepted before the Lord. See? So it was a turban, and then the thing that's attached to the turban for the forehead. So I'll read it one more time so you can see. You shall make a plate of pure gold and engrave on it like the engraving of a signet. The signet was like, like the stamp that the kings would put their initials on so they could sign off on something. And it was supposed to say, holy to the Lord. So it's just pretty short, holy to the Lord. So it would be the signet attached to their turban. So the turban, and then it would be attached to the turban, holy to the Lord. So God told them to wear something on their head. But the turban is not the veil. The talking about was being covered with the veil. And of course, in this case, this is the priests and what the priests were supposed to wear. So all the way up in 1 Corinthians 11, well then, of course, they weren't underneath the priests anymore because they were believers of Messiah, Yeshua, Jesus. So of course they had Jews that were learned, and they had grown up in the Hebraic schools. They knew much about Judaism. They were very educated, especially Paul. He was studying to be a priest. And, but were they wearing turbans in 1 Corinthians 11? I'm not sure. However, in this case, the turbans was for the priests. So there's a difference there, what they had the leaders of the followers of Messiah wearing during services. It doesn't explain that. So, but they weren't supposed to wear the veil that the women wear, and they weren't supposed to keep it on the head. They were supposed to take it off. But as far as the priest did wear this turban. Okay, so you shall weave the coat and checker work of fine linen, and you shall make a turban of fine linen, and you shall make a sash embroidered with needlework. For Aaron's sons you shall make coats and sashes and caps. So that's another thing for your head. You shall make them for glory and beauty. So it's supposed to be, nice for the eyes to look at. It's supposed to have a holy aura about it. And you shall put them on Aaron your brother and on his sons with him, and shall anoint them and ordain them and consecrate them, that they may serve as priests. You shall make for them linen undergarments to cover their naked flesh. So they would go up the stairs and you could see underneath, so that's why they had to wear the undergarments. Because why? Now this is going to go into the next thing. So let's go ahead and read that one more time. See, I'm going to explain to you, and it's over here in Deuteronomy. So this is going to make a connection to the verse in Deuteronomy for you. So let's read this real quick again. You shall make for them linen undergarments to cover their naked flesh. They shall reach from the hips to the thighs. And they shall be on Aaron and on his sons when they go into the tent of meeting, or when they come near the altar to minister in the holy place, lest they bear guilt and die. This shall be a statute forever for him and for his offspring. And I will see, so what I figure is, because it talks about going to the tent of meeting, it talks about going to the altar to minister. I imagine, it was to make sure that you couldn't see underneath as they would walk upstairs. As they would be up above people speaking, they would have to walk up some stairs. And, it was supposed to be so you couldn't see underneath. And why? Now I'm going to show you. In Deuteronomy chapter 22, verse 5, it says that woman shall not wear a man's garment, nor shall a man put on a woman's cloak. For whoever does these things is an abomination to the Lord your God. So the thing is, I didn't write the names of what their clothing was called back then, but they would wear similar clothing. The males and the females, they would wear similar clothing. I imagine winter and summer, it would be, they would wear a cloak, a coat on top, heavier material. But the men would wear like, sort of like, I would say similar to like a very long t-shirt, but it wouldn't, as far as length, not saying how it's designed or how it looked, but as far as length. And then they would wear a sash around their waist. And the men would wear a sash and the women would wear a sash, but the men's sash was more simple and it had a different look to it. The women's sash, it was more ornate. It was more decorated to look more feminine. The men's clothing then would be like a really long t-shirt length, let's say, to their knees. But of course, like I said, different material, different design. But it'd be like to their knees or so. Or maybe slightly below their knees, depending on like the artwork you look at, I guess. And the women's was supposed to be down to their ankles. So this idea people have where they say, oh, women aren't supposed to wear pants, women are supposed to wear skirts, and men are supposed to wear pants. Well, Deuteronomy 22:5 isn't talking about dresses and skirts and pants, because the women would wear this long tunic kind of thing, this long, I guess you would say it would be more like a dress for her, because it would go from, the top all the way down to her ankles. Where the men's, it would be more like a very long t-shirt. It would be from, his top all the way down to his knee, or maybe slightly below his knee. It didn't cover him like the women's did. They wore similar material. They were both sort of like, hers was like a dress, his was like a very long shirt, but the design was the same. They both wear a sash, like I said. The women's would be ornate. It would be different in that way. It would be decorated to be like more feminine, where the man's would be more masculine looking. It wouldn't have like the pretties of the girl's sash. So it's not about pants and shirts. And that's why it mentioned in the other verse in Exodus about the man having an undergarment so that you couldn't see underneath it, because he'd wear the shorter thing. It would only be to around his knee. So if he were to go upstairs to preach, if the priest were to go up the stairs to preach or to make an offering, you could possibly see underneath his his long shirt-like clothing. See? So don't listen to this thing. Now, of course, it's your decision as far as like what material kind of clothes you're going to wear. But it also has to do with what you can afford, your height, Finding dresses, that's great. If you can sew dresses, that's great. If you want to wear dresses, that's great. But to say that the women are supposed to wear dresses and the men pants, well, back then both men and women wore a dress-like material, a dress-like design. The men didn't wear pants. The men wore an underclothing underneath, and their shirt was to their knee. And the woman's was all the way to her ankle. So, what you decide as far as modesty, then you decide. But you see, so the Jews do use this verse for modesty. So some Jews believe that the women are supposed to wear dresses. Some Jews don't do that. Some Jews also, the women cover their hair, Orthodox. And then some women, they're told because of the culture that they're living in, that they don't. However, they forget the fact that they're supposed to be set apart. They're not supposed to be considering being like the culture when they're not supposed to be of the world. They're supposed to be different. They're supposed to be, a strange people in a strange land. They're not supposed to be like everybody else. So their argument, the Jews' argument of having women wear shadels, which is a wig, is what most of them would do. They'd wear a shadel or a wig. However, some Jews, they don't wear shadels. They don't wear wigs, and they don't wear tichel, which is a scarf. they just go normal because their rabbis say, well, you're supposed to, blend in with the culture and be like the culture. That norm doesn't go with this norm. But like I said, the Jews are supposed to be a strange people in a strange land. They're not supposed to be like everybody else and say, well, everybody else is doing this or nobody else is doing what we do, so we're not going to do that anymore. That argument doesn't go, If they're going to use any argument, the argument shouldn't be used because, if you're going to use that argument, you might as well just say, well, dress like everybody wears and wear tank tops and short shorts. Because it's what everybody does. You can't say, I'm going to do what everybody else does. What you should do is what you feel that you need to do to feel like you are, a godly woman. Anyway, now we have Proverbs, and they use Proverbs also. Chapter 31, Proverbs chapter 31, verses 22. They mention verse 22, and 30 because they do believe in the book of Proverbs. They don't have all the books we do. Proverbs is one of them. And I wanted to read something from Proverbs because I have heard women teach that a woman is supposed to dress very plain. She's not supposed to dress very nice or frilly. And the whole thing with the head covering isn't to not be beautiful. It's to keep your hair because your hair is your glory, and that's supposed to be something special kept for your husband. Remember in the other video I mentioned how the head covering is like when you go to church, and 1 Corinthians 11 is talking about church gathering or a religious gathering of praying or teaching. And normally it would actually be at least a little of both. So if you go anywhere where there's going to be praying together, you're supposed to cover your head. That's what 1 Corinthians 11 says. Now, if you're going to do that or you're not, like I said before, that's up to you if you are convinced or not. But where I was going with that is as far as beauty goes. So you see, you could be beautiful, but you keep your hair, which is your glory. So you cover your glory for God, at least for the Christians. You cover your glory for God and for Jesus, right? Because Jesus is holy. He sits at the right hand of God, and he is God the Son, therefore, because God has given him power. So much to say in a little video. But so therefore, if a man is supposed to love his wife like Christ loves the church, then the woman covers her hair to cover her glory, to give God all the glory. So if a man is supposed to love the woman like Christ loves the church, then we're supposed to respect the man like we would respect Christ. So if we were going to respect Christ and cover our hair, then we would, so that everybody else could give Christ the glory and not be focusing on our beauty as far as our natural glory, because God says your hair is your glory. Okay, well, so then you would cover your hair so that only your husband would see your glory. Okay, so there's that. And that's pretty much why the Jews cover their hair. That's why it is for their husband. Now, I have this verse here. They're talking about being plain. There are women out there that teach that you're not supposed to adorn yourself. You're not supposed to be beautiful. You're supposed to be very plain. Or you could be pretty, but you have to be very plain. And anyway, so I wanted to read this verse here. And it also because it mentions the head covering in Old Testament, so time of the Jews. And it's Proverbs chapter 31, and we're going to skip to verse 22. And it says, she makes bed coverings for herself. But it's not bed coverings. I don't know why they translated it that way. Because you don't cover yourself in a bed covering. The word should be linens. I think King James says linens. I'm reading from NIV just because it's easier for newcomers to understand the NIV. She makes linens for herself. Her clothing is fine linen and purple. Now maybe they translated it to bed coverings for herself. I don't know, because maybe it's the same material that they would use for their head coverings, for their veils, their tichels. They call the veil the tichel, the head covering. She makes linens for herself. Her clothing is fine linen and purple. Her husband is known in the gates when he sits among the elders of the land. So right there it shows that she wears purple. It mentions the collar. Purple was like a collar, a regal collar back then. So to say that you're supposed to dress plainly is just not so. And then over here in verse 30 it says, charm is deceitful and beauty is vain. The thing is the word for vain in Hebrew, I wrote it all the way back here. I was studying Genesis a little bit, so I got to turn here to find where I wrote it, so I can make sure I don't miss it. Okay, so the word for Hebrew for their idea of vain isn't our idea of vain. Vain isn't something to be thought of as you shouldn't dress beautifully because it's just too much. That's not what the verse means. It says charm is deceitful and beauty is vain. But what it really means is you could waste away thinking about false things. You could waste your life away thinking about false things. Life is short. And Havel Havalim was vanity of vanities. It's passing a very short period of time. So they're saying that life is fleeting. Don't waste your, so to not waste your time thinking too much about the beauty. So in this case, charm is deceitful and beauty is vain, but a woman who fears the Lord is to be praised. She's supposed to put more attention, so she should be praised. She should put more attention on being godly and having her relationship with God. It doesn't mean that she can't be beautiful, but she's supposed to focus more on her relationship with God, so she should be more of a godly woman, so that she'll receive praises for being godly, not so much for her beauty. It does not say being beautiful is a sin or dressing beautifully is sinful. She makes bed coverings or she makes linens for herself. Her clothing is fine linen and purple. She could be beautiful, but her focus shouldn't be just on her beauty. People should if people are going to praise her, it should be for her inner beauty. Doesn't mean she can't be beautiful outwardly, but she should be known for being a beautiful person inwardly and her behavior reflecting that. Charm is deceitful and beauty is vain, but a woman who fears the Lord is to be praised. So that's what it's talking about. She should be praised for her personality, for her behaviors, that she has a relationship with God. Her behavior shows that she has a relationship with God. It doesn't mean she can't be beautiful. So there's a lot there's to squelch the fact that you can't be pretty. The head covering isn't so much to not make you pretty. It's just to keep your glory for your husband. So your natural beauty is for him, but your outward beauty, you could still be outwardly beautiful. So now I want to go to Song of Solomon. Chapter 3, chapter 4, and it's verses 1 and 2. They use these verses. The rabbis mention these verses. Like I said, I've listened to the rabbis. I went and I listened to the rabbis. I looked up videos of rabbis talking about head coverings, and so far these are the verses that they've mentioned. Behold, you are beautiful, my love. Behold, you are beautiful. Now let's back up. Actually, let's back up to chapter 3 a little bit. It says, chapter 3, we'll go back to verse 11. Go out, O daughters of Zion, and look upon King Solomon, with the crown with which his mother crowned him on the day of his wedding, on the day of the gladness of his heart. So it's actually talking about a wedding day. But the Jews believe that once you are wed, starting on your wedding day, you're supposed to cover your hair with a veil and not take it off. You always wear a veil from that time forward to show that you are married. Behold, you are beautiful, my love. Behold, you are beautiful. Your eyes are doves behind your veil. Now, in Bible times, also, some women would cover even their face. However, they'd still show their eyes. But they would cover their face around people that weren't family. But in this case, the wedding veil, I suppose she would have it just like we do now. Cover her face, and then he would lift the veil. At least, anyways, that is what they do in the Jewish celebrations, weddings. Okay, behold, you are beautiful, my love. Behold, you are beautiful. Your eyes are doves behind your veil. Your hair is like a flock of goats. Now, this is the verse that they hang on. Your hair is like a flock of goats, leaping down the slope of Gilead. So they're trying to show that your hair is a thing of beauty. And therefore, they believe that only the husband is supposed to see that beauty. And that's why they believe that she's supposed to keep it covered. That's the verse that the rabbis used in the videos that I watched. It was more than one. I've listened to about 3 or 4 talking about head coverings. It says, your hair is like a flock of goats leaping down the slopes of Gilead. So therefore they think that shows that it's a thing of sensual beauty. And they think that you're supposed to, whatever is naturally sensual, you're supposed to cover. So they show that, and then it goes on and talks a little bit more. You can read the rest of it, and it shows, the rest of the parts of the body of the woman that are also, like it mentions even the neck. It says, your neck is like the Tower of David, built in rows of stone. On it hang 1,000 shields, all of them shields of warriors. Maybe that's the earrings. So some Jewish women, they'll wear the veil to cover their neck, but not all of them do. That's another thing, like for the Muslims, they think that the neck is also a thing to not be shown. That's why they cover their neck, because they think that it's also sensual, like it shows in these verses. So there's that part, and you can read the rest of it, so you can see that's talking about the rest of the woman there and her beauty. And then they use Isaiah. No, that's it. However, they do read from the book of Isaiah. They do read from it. It's considered one of their books. Their main books that they read are the first 5 chapters. But the verses that I've read to you thus far are the arguments that the Jews use for covering their hair. Now, this can be something considered for the Christians as far as head covering. Isaiah chapter 6, and it's just the first 2 verses. In the year that King Uzziah died, I saw the Lord sitting upon a throne, high and lifted up, and the train of his robe filled the temple. Above him stood the seraphim. Each had 6 wings. With 2 he covered his face, and with 2 he covered his feet, and with 2 he flew. And one called to another and said, Holy, holy, holy is the Lord of hosts. The whole earth is full of his glory. So the reason why you would cover your hair in church, 1 Corinthians chapter 11, would be because the angels are supposed to be around, because the church is supposed to have the Holy Spirit present. And therefore the angels would be present also. And because the angels cover themselves, then that's why in 1 Corinthians they say the woman is supposed to cover her hair, because her hair is her glory. So she covers her glory, much like the angels will cover themselves with their wings, but they don't cover their hair. It doesn't say. It says that they cover their face. Maybe because their faces are bright, maybe because their faces are just so angelic. Much like our hair is said to be our glory, maybe their faces are their glory. So it's not because of the fallen angels that you would cover your hair in a holy meeting, like praying or prophesying, teaching, listening to teaching, or gathering to pray. It would be because of the angels, the holy angels. Like I said, each had 6 wings. 2 he covered his face, with 2 he covered his feet, and with 2 he flew. So they'd cover their feet and they'd cover their face. That would be their glory that they're covering. So the woman in 1 Corinthians 11, they say, is to cover her glory when she goes before the Lord in public prayer or prophesying. It could also mean private prayer. And that's up to you how you're going to view that. So read 1 Corinthians slowly and see that, yes, the woman's hair is her glory, but they're talking about how things should go in church. And aside from that, yes, her hair is her covering. Now, I was going to go to Genesis real quick because people tried to talk about covering because of fallen angels. Which, so there's a verse in Matthew, Mark, and Luke. So I'll just skip to the one, whichever one I get to first, I suppose. Oh, I think I have another. Oh, I have another one for the Jews, but I'll go ahead and, since I'm on this, I'll go ahead and read that. If I can get to it. All right, so we'll do the one in Mark. Mark, it's the same verse. So Mark 22:30. I gotta turn to it because I didn't mark it. Come on, come on, come on. Okay, well, I obviously wrote that wrong because there isn't a Mark 22. Mark 12. Oh boy, sorry about that. Mark 12. I was looking at, I think, Luke. Okay, Mark. So this verse is found Mark 12:25, Matthew 22, Mark 12:25, Matthew 22:30, and Luke 20, and I don't know what verse. All right, so Mark 12:25. Oh, not quite there. Mark 12:25. And it says, for when they rise, I'll go to 24 and I'll just read this little section here. Jesus said to them, is this not the reason you are wrong? Because you know neither the scriptures nor the power of God. For when they rise from the dead, they neither marry nor are given in marriage, but are like angels in heaven. So I wanted to read that part because people are talking about the head covering being because of fallen angels, and they say the fallen angels mixed with people. But it says that the angels don't marry and they're not given in marriage. Now, of course, that's talking about the angels, not fallen angels. It doesn't say angels. But if the angels are that way, I imagine the fallen angels are too. Also, when it talks about fallen angels, it says fallen angels. It does not say Nephilim for fallen angels. It just says Nephilim, and I think Nephilim might mean, actually Nephilim for Hebrew means giants. So, anyway. So, for when they rise from the dead, they neither marry nor are given in marriage, but are like angels in heaven. See, so they don't marry and they're not given in marriage. So they likely would not have children with human beings. Now, of course, like I said, this is talking about angels, not fallen angels. But I would imagine it would be the same. And why would God permit something like that? And another thing I thought about with the Nephilim, meaning giants, because that's what it says it means. People way back in Genesis lived a lot longer. And I'm going to read that part in a minute. But they lived a lot longer. You know, they lived 400, 500, 700 years. So therefore, for a heart to last that long, it wasn't just because of maybe them eating healthily or, you know, because after Adam and Eve sinned, you know, then things changed and sin came into the world. It was perfect before. And then I imagine, you know, the heavens were open and things changed. The environment changed, you know. So I think that God did something with the genetics, where before the genetics were more protected. Their bodies would have been bigger. They would have had bigger hearts, which is why they would have lived longer. That's just a thought that came to my mind. Anyway, it says, and as for the dead being raised, have you not read in the book of Moses and the passage about the bush, how God spoke to him saying, I am the God of Abraham and the God of Isaac and the God of Jacob. He is not God of the dead, but of the living. You are quite wrong. So, spiritual living. And, you know, if you're in Christ, then you never die spiritually. Now, I wanted to read something else which I forgot to read. Another reason why the Jews cover their head according to the rabbis. The rabbis teach Isaiah 47 verse 2. where it shows that women used to wear veils when they were out working. It says, "Take the millstones and grind flour and put off your veil." So they would wear a veil, and in this verse is telling them to take it off. They normally wear it when they're working at the millstones grinding flour. Why? Maybe they were wearing the veil to protect their head from the sun, out in the sun grinding the wheat. It could just been because of that. But the rabbis use this verse saying, you see, women would cover their hair with veils. And so that's why they still teach for the women to cover their hair. They use this verse also as an example. So did the women always wear their veil? They only have these few verses, and other than that, you have artwork to show women wearing their veils. And so you could just go back and re-listen to all the reasons why I've given you as far as what the Jews teach, other than the one that I just skipped ahead to. Take the millstone. So it's the humiliation of Babylon. Come down and sit in the dust, O virgin daughter of Babylon. Sit on the ground without a throne, O daughter of the Chaldeans. For you shall no more be called tender and delicate. Take the millstones and grind flour. Put off your veil. Strip off your robe, uncover your legs, pass through the rivers. Your nakedness shall be uncovered, and your disgrace shall be seen. So they consider it a disgrace for a woman to uncover her hair in public. I will take vengeance and I will spare no one. And then it goes on. You guys can read the rest. And now I wanted to go ahead and talk a little bit about this idea in Genesis that the people talk about here. Which part was I? Let's see. Well, I guess I'll just read just a little bit here. So we're around Genesis chapter 3 and 4. In Genesis chapter 3:22, it says, Then the Lord God said, Behold, the man has become like one of us, in knowing good and evil. Now lest he reach out his hand and take also from the tree of life and eat and live forever. Therefore the Lord God sent him out of the Garden of Eden to work the ground from which he was taken. He drove out the man, and at the east of the Garden of Eden he placed the cherubim. See, now there they use the word cherubim. Now, of course, that's an angel belonging to God from heaven, not a fallen angel, but the one from heaven is called cherubim. And a flaming sword that turned every way to guard the way to the tree of life. Now, the thing with Cain and Abel happened, and it says, now, the thing that I wanted to mention with that is, between this with the Cain and Abel, well, there's a big long lesson there. I'll have to do it in another video. So I'll skip over with that for a little bit. But some of the things in here, some of them, like Mahujael, his name means who proclaims God. And then there's Enosh. At the time of the people began to call upon the name of the Lord, there in chapter 4, the very last verse of chapter 4, 26. It says, To Seth also a son was born, and he called his name Enosh. And at that time the people began to call upon the Lord. And here it talks about people living a long time. It says Adam, the days of Adam after he fathered Seth were 800 years, and he had other sons and daughters. Thus all the days that Adam lived were 930 years, and he died. When Seth had lived 105 years, he fathered Enosh. Seth lived after he fathered Enosh 807 years, and had other sons and daughters. Thus all the days of Seth were 912 years, and he died. And there's some more here. Enosh lived 905 years. Kenan lived 70 years. When he had lived 70 years, he fathered Mahalalel. And after Kenan lived after he fathered Mahalalel 840 years. So that means he lived to be around 910 years, it says. He died. Jared, 830 years. Mahalalel, 895 years. Methuselah, 300 years. Enoch, 365 years. Enoch walked with God, and he was not, for God took him. So that shows one thing. Those who proclaim God, some called to the name of the Lord during that time. Enoch was walked with God, and he was taken by God. So it shows that there were those who called out to God. And it shows how long people lived. So therefore, I believe that at the time of Genesis, people were bigger. Their hearts were stronger. Their veins, their heart, the parts of their body were bigger, stronger, and would have lived longer. They would have lasted longer. They could have taken a lot bigger beating. You know, they would have lasted longer than our small bodies would have. And here it shows another one going to God. It says, thus all the days of Lamech were 777 years, and he died. There's that number 777. So there were people who called to God. And that's one thing that I want to say why I'm saying it. Where does it say? Oh, it was before the flood. Okay, let's see. Oh, yeah, okay, so it's chapter 6, Genesis chapter 6. When man began to multiply on the face of the land, now this is the part where people hang on. I'm going to show you what it really means, not what they say it means. Now, I could be wrong because I am not the ultimate authority, but I'll give you my interpretation. Because we're talking about the head covering, and they use this for a reason to head cover. It's not the reason to head cover. Like I said before, it has to do with church and the angels coming to church, where it's supposed to be a holy place and the Holy Spirit is supposed to fill it. So therefore the angels would be in church. And since the angels cover themselves, we cover ourselves in church. So this argument that they use is wrong. Don't listen to their argument. I'll tell you what it is. They say that you cover your head because of fallen angels. That's not so. Because listen to this. When man began to multiply on the face of the land, and the daughters were born to them, the sons of God saw the daughters of man. They'll tell you that the sons of God were the angels. And then there were the daughters of man. Those are the people on the earth. That's what they'll tell you. But the fallen angels were no longer of God. Yes, God created them. But they were no longer angels of God like the seraphim that I told you about at the where they guarded the gate at the Garden of Eden. God called them seraphim. He didn't call them sons of God. He called them seraphim. And the other thing that I want to tell you is this. Adam is a son of God. Now, he's not the son like the Lord Jesus Christ, but he was the first human son of God. And then he made Eve from Adam's rib. So therefore, Adam is a son of God, and Eve, the woman, is a daughter of man. You see, the daughters, the women, come from the man's rib. The man comes from God. That's why also 1 Corinthians 11, the man, the men, not the rabbis, the men were supposed to uncover. However, now the pastors in that time, that's what they were saying. The pastors were supposed to be too, if they were back then still wearing the veils. They uncover their hair, because there's a difference. The men would uncover their hair, but the women would cover their glory. The man was, and it said because the man came from God, where the woman comes from man. See? So where it says, when man began to multiply on the face of the land, and daughters were born to them, the sons of God saw the daughters of man. That just means the men saw the women. The sons of God, Adam. Adam came as a son of God. The women come from the man's rib. They're daughters of man. Sorry, I guess I should have brought a glass of water over here, but when the men began to multiply on the face of the land, and the daughters were born to them, the sons of God saw the daughters of man were attractive, and they took as their wives any they chose. So basically, in chapter 6, they're taking us back to pretty much the beginning. Once, they're showing us once that there was population on the earth and it continued to populate. Then the Lord said, my spirit shall not, see, because before this also, here they gave us like a list of who was born, then who was born, then who was born, and who was born, how long each one of them lived. And then it says that they began to multiply. So then it got to the point where they're multiplying so much, they're not going to list everybody that was born now. They're not going to list everybody who fathered everybody who fathered everybody. They get to a certain point, and then they're like, then the world, it just populated. It just boomed, and people just started to multiply more and more. They didn't list any more people after that. After Noah was 500 years old, Noah fathered Shem, Ham, and Japheth. So they're telling you now that in the time of Noah, there were a lot of people that had populated the earth. And they took as their wives any they chose. Then the Lord said, my spirit shall not abide in man forever, for he is flesh. His days shall be 120 years. Now you see, up here in chapter 5, it ends with Noah was 500 years old, and he still continued to live. I think he lived to 750 also, or something like that. Lamech lived 777 years, and before that, the 595. Like I said, they were living hundreds and hundreds of years. Now God, and then it says, and the world became so populated that in Noah's day, they started to fall away from God. And they fell away from God. There were so many of them. It was very populated, and God was like, you know what? I'm going to limit their days now. They're only going to live 120 years. So maybe because God, whatever God did to the genetics, people started to get smaller. And that's how he kept them from living so long. Because their bodies just wouldn't be able to last that long. Now that's my reasoning, that's just my take on it. But so he says, my spirit shall not abide in man forever, for he is flesh, his days shall be 120 years. The Nephilim, now that means giants. Down in the notes it even says for chapter 4, Nephilim, thugs or tyrants, sons of God. But I looked it up, and it says that for Hebrew it meant giants. Here it says, mighty men, the men of renown. First nobility of the world was a group of tyrants who were admired nonetheless. They were sinners ripe for judgment in God's eyes. They were bigger, and so they were the Nephilim. That's what they were known of, giants. They were on the earth in those days, and also afterward. In Exodus, it mentions giants. The battle of the wall of Jericho came down. In that land, there had been giants. So there were still some giants even after the flood. It was still in their genes. It still hadn't washed out yet. And there's still today people who are very tall. First person I knew who was really tall, I was in high school. Her mother, her sister, they were all tall. We all know, we've all seen tall people, basketball players. Boy, there can be some really tall basketball players. One of my children's doctors was a man, and he was really tall, and I was like, wow, he could have been a basketball player. He ended up telling me that he hurt himself. He had I think he had sprained his arm or broken his arm. I don't know. I think it was his foot. Oh, it was his foot. He had hurt his foot playing basketball. But he was a doctor. He said he felt it was more important to study to be a doctor. He was one of the residents there. So, really tall. High school, of course, we all have known tall people. Tall people haven't gone away. They've just gotten smaller and smaller. I'm one of the smallest, not the smallest. So anyway, my spirit shall not abide in man forever, for he is flesh. His days shall be 120 years. The Nephilim were on the earth in those days, and also afterward. When the sons of God came in to the daughters of man, like I said, that just means the men and the women. They multiplied. Adam was a son of God. Then Eve was a daughter of man because God didn't create her from the dust of the ground. He created her from his rib. Adam was created from the dust of the ground. He was the son of God. When the sons of God came into the daughters of man, they bore children to them. These were the mighty men. So these people were still big. These were the mighty men who were of old, these men of renown. But that's when God decided that he'd only give them 120 years. So things are, through time, would change and people would start to get smaller and smaller because God did something to the genetics because he decided that they wouldn't live that long anymore. My spirit shall not abide in man forever, for he is flesh. His days shall be 120 years. So God had decided to do something different. That's why they were Nephilim. And then God said, you know what, these people, they're big, they're bad. I'm going to fix it so that they can't live so long now because they get out of hand. They just don't want to listen. They just don't want to be good. And the Lord saw the wickedness of man was great in the earth, and that every intention of the thoughts of his heart was only evil continually. Also why he had to create such a big flood, because they were big. And the Lord, and that's why the boat, when it finally landed, the ark finally landed, it was on top of a big mountain, Ararat. God had to flood it really high up because the people were tall. That's just my take on it. Anyway, the Lord saw the wickedness of man was great in the earth, and that every intention of the thoughts of his heart was only evil continually. And the Lord was sorry that he had made man on the earth, and it grieved him to his heart. So the Lord said, I will blot out man whom I have created from the face of the land, man and animals and creeping things and birds of the heavens, for I am sorry that I have made them. But Noah found favor in the eyes of the Lord, and then it goes on about Noah. So through time, people became smaller. When we get to Exodus, people were much smaller. There was David and Goliath. Goliath was big, and that was after the flood. You know, like I said in Exodus, they came to the battle of Jericho, the wall of Jericho that came tumbling down. In that land, there were giants. So, you know, the people got smaller and smaller. It doesn't say that, you know, it doesn't mean that the genetics weren't still there, but God was lessening it. And now we're to the point where people, yes, there's still some tall people, but we don't much hear about people living past around 100 years old. And so I just wanted to mention that because there are, you know, people out there trying to tell you that we do things. And think about it like this too. The angels, the fallen angels wouldn't have seen the women from up above. They wouldn't have just been attracted to their hair. They would have been attracted to just their general beauty. Just like now. You could still cover your hair and still be beautiful. Heck, you could be plain as day. Muslim woman who wears all black, covers her face. She could still be found beautiful for her eyes, for her voice, for her intellect. She's still going to be found beautiful. There's nothing you can do. You'd have to put her in a box and tell her she, you know, tape up her mouth and not let her be seen at all for her not to be beautiful. No matter what, a woman's beauty is going to show in one way or another. You know, there have been abuses to Muslim women who cover themselves completely. The same thing therefore would also been with the Nephilim. If human beings can do bad things, Nephilim could do bad things. It doesn't take you covering your hair to keep the Nephilim from finding you attractive if Nephilim meant fallen angels. Nephilim just meant giants. The angels didn't mix with the human beings. That's just not true. I started to believe that too because it sounds so dang convincing. And then they mentioned the book of Enoch. Well, guess what? That's just not, it's just, I'm sorry, you can disagree with me if you want to, you know. You can hate me if you want to, not follow me anymore if you want to, but we have to think common sense. God wouldn't have allowed that to happen back then, you know. It wasn't because of the fallen angels. And if that was the case, there's still fallen angels. Where are they now? Why are they not mixing us anymore? Not many people, you know, cover their heads. And that wouldn't be the protection. God protects you because you belong to him. He has a plan, and surely that wouldn't have been part of it. It's not like he'd be like, oh no, they went against my plan, let me to destroy them. It wasn't like that. They just fell away from him and they just stopped listening to him. They stopped paying attention and they went on doing their own things just like now. So anyway, I could do a further study of Genesis in another video. that pretty much sums up everything I'd have to say about it, though, anyway. And so there you go. We could jump over to 1 Corinthians chapter 11 just real quick. Yeah, so let's go ahead and read over it because it's so very short. We'll read over that together to sum it all up, and then that'll be pretty much that. Be imitators of me as I am of Christ. So we're supposed to, he was a Jew, trying to teach the people back then, Jews and non-Jews, to be like him, to imitate him in the way he honors Christ. And then he gets to his head coverings. Now I commend you because you remember me in everything and maintain the traditions. They were maintaining the Jewish traditions then, even as I delivered them to you. But I want you to understand that the head of every man is Christ. Christ created man. Christ created Adam from the dust of the ground. The head of a wife is her husband because she comes from his rib. And the head of Christ is God. Every man who prays or prophesies with his head covered dishonors his head. But every wife who prays or prophesies with her head uncovered dishonors her head. So, every man who prays or prophesies with his head covered. This isn't just about women in head covering. This is about men in head covering too. So therefore, he's talking about in church because he's talking about the group when they're together praying or prophesying. He's writing this letter to the church. He's talking about when they come together to pray, when they come together to prophesy. Every man who prays or prophesies with his head covered dishonors his head. So he should shave his head before he goes to church. Every time he's going to go to church, he should shave his head so his head's not covered. It's not talking about hair. It's talking about covering the hair, it's talking about covering the hair. It's not talking about the hair being the covering. Every man who prays or prophesies with his head covered dishonors his head. It doesn't mean he has to go shave his head every Sunday. But every wife who prays or prophesies with her head uncovered dishonors her head. Back then, women weren't shaving their head, they were cutting their hair. And only some were. That was there were women who cut their hair and didn't cover their hair. There were women who were ladies of the night who did that. But it's not talking about ladies of the night. It's just talking about what you do in church services. And like I said, it ties together with the verse about the man. It's not just about the women. So for the verses to make sense about the women, they have to make sense about the men too. They have to go together. So we'll go right back again. Every man who prays or prophesies with his head covered dishonors his head. It's not talking about shaving their head on Sunday. It's talking about taking something off of their head. For if a wife will not cover her head, then she should cut her hair. She should cut her hair short. It doesn't say, for if a wife shaves her head, then she should cut her hair. That wouldn't make sense. It's not talking about your hair being your covering in this instance. For if a wife will not cover her head, then she should cut her hair short. You can't cut your hair short if it's already short. But since it is disgraceful for a wife to cut off her hair or shave her head, let her cover her head. For a man ought not to cover... Now, of course, that would also sound silly. But since it is disgraceful for a wife to cut off her hair, don't cut her hair. Well... or shave her head. So basically what, you're never supposed to cut your hair, and now there's people who teach that a woman is never supposed to cut her hair. But it's not talking about never cutting your hair either. After all, that wouldn't be healthy. And God wants you to be healthy. He says your body is a temple. It does not belong to you. It belongs to the Holy Spirit, and you're supposed to take care of it. You have to cut your hair to take care of it. Otherwise, you get split ends and they split all the way to the top and it looks real frizzy. It's hard to brush and it doesn't look nice. And you wouldn't cover your head just to cover up your split ends. That would be kind of silly too, because then your hair wouldn't be pretty for your husband. It would be all frizzy and yucky and you wouldn't be able to brush it well. It's not saying you can't ever cut your hair. That's just not healthy for your hair. But since it is disgraceful for a wife to cut her hair or shave her head, to cut off her hair or shave her head. It doesn't say to cut your hair either. If you're going to use that for, if you say, oh, but it says to cut her hair. It doesn't. It says to cut off her hair. To cut off her hair, that means not have any. Or shave her head, let her cover her head. It doesn't say let her grow her hair. It doesn't say let her not cut her hair. It says let her cover her head. For a man ought not to cover his head. So does it mean he's not supposed to have hair? Or does it mean that he's supposed, well, I guess they would say it means he's supposed to cut his hair. Okay, so how short? But it doesn't say that. It says, for a man ought not to cover his head. If that was the case, your hair covers your head no matter how long it is. It still covers your head. You'd have to shave it all off for it not to cover your head. For a man ought not to cover his head. So therefore, if his hair is just supposed to be short, it would still be covering his head, so that it wouldn't work. It's not saying that the man's supposed to have his hair short because his head is still covered then. It's talking about a covering over the hair. For a man ought not to cover his head, since he is the image and glory of God. God made Adam from the dust of the ground. He is the image of God. But woman is the glory of man, because we come from his rib and we were made for him. We are made to be his company. We are made to be his enjoyment also. Something for him to look at and love, as well as to be his company. Something for him to adore. For man was not made from woman, but woman from man. Neither was man created for woman, because we weren't here first, so of course they weren't made for us. Neither was man created for woman, but woman for man. That is why a wife ought to have a symbol of authority on her head. So the wife is supposed to cover her hair as a symbol of marriage, that she belongs to him. She's taken. See, she's married. She has a man. She's made for him. It's a symbol that she belongs to someone. That is why a wife ought to have a symbol of authority on her head. And it's also, notice the word authority there. We're supposed to be his companion, but we're also supposed to be his counselor. You know, we're supposed to let him know what we think about things and, you know, give him encouragement and give him what wisdom we have, what counseling we might have for him, you know, what we might think about something. And to show that we have the authority of our husband on us. Show that we are taken. Because of the angels, it says. Why does it say because of the angels? Because we're talking about church. In church, the Holy Spirit's supposed to be present. If the Holy Spirit is supposed to be present, the angels would be there. Also, it says that every time a person accepts Jesus Christ as their Lord and Savior, they believe God. They believe in God, they believe his teachings, and they believe that he sent his only son. Then, every time that happens, the angels rejoice. So therefore, in church, that's supposed to be happening. We're supposed to be winning souls to Christ, even in church. And when that happens, the angels would be present, and the angels would be rejoicing. And so therefore, because of the angels, we would have our heads covered, because the angels cover themselves in the presence of God. And when you go to church, you're supposed to be in the presence of God. If you're in the presence of God, so are the angels. And the angels, when they're in the presence of God, they cover their faces and they cover their feet. And so therefore, we cover our glory just like they cover their glory. They're so angelic, their face, their feet, they're angelic. They cover themselves. So they'd be covering like this, and they'd have their feet covered. Well, it wouldn't just cover their feet because their wings are big. Think about that too. Now we're talking about the seraphim, the ones with the wings. they're covering themselves like that, their hair would actually be covered too, though. But their faces would be covered, the whole thing. Imagine that with feathers this way and this way. Everything would be covered. And their feet, everything above the feet and below the feet would be covered, because those wings are going to be expansive. They're big. They can fly to earth. That might sound silly, but it says that in the verse about them covering with their wings. So it's not silly. So that's why it says because of the angels. Nevertheless, in the Lord, woman is not independent of man, nor man of woman. The man's not independent of the woman either. And why does it say that? Because the man and the woman, when they come together, they are one body. That's what God says. A man and the woman are one flesh. They fit together like puzzle pieces. They make a whole piece, you know? They make a whole puzzle. It's complete when the two of them are joined together. So, for as woman was made from man, because we come from his rib, so man is now, just like with Adam and Eve, so man is now born of woman, and all things are from God. And that's to show that man and women are equal. They just have different roles, both to be respected, both to be loved. It doesn't mean one mistreats the other, saying that they have all power over her. That's not what it's about. It just means that now she has a man that she answers to. But, he does answer to her too. They are, like puzzle pieces that come together. If he was so much greater than her, then it just wouldn't work. She comes from his rib to show that she is next to him. She's not below him. Well, she might be somewhat in stature below him, but she is at his side to show that there is equality. That's why God says there is no man, there is no woman. We are all equal in Jesus Christ. So a man's not supposed to lord it over her, but it does show that he has some authority, because somebody has to be the one to make the final decisions about some things, Anyway, and all things are from God. Now it says, judge for yourselves. But remember I said in the last video I did, he said that about eating too, of meat. I guess I should do a little video about that too. But it's just saying you have to think for yourself now. Think for yourself. Are you convinced? What do you think? And that's why I tell you guys too, I don't want to try to tell you that you guys have to do this or you guys have to do that. I just want to make a better explanation for you guys so you guys can make a better decision for yourself. Because, yeah, I'm just another voice in the many, many voices out there. But there are so many voices out there that are very demanding. And, it's not about demanding. I'm not here to tell you what to do. I'm just here to explain to you what it means. And then you decide for yourself. It also has to be something that you're comfortable with. And it's not going to mean much to God if you don't do it from your heart. It has to come from your heart, and you do have to be convinced on it. But, I do want you to have a good understanding of it. Anyway, and like I said also, your salvation doesn't rest on whether or not you cover your hair. So there's that too. So I'm not going to tell you that you're not going to heaven if you don't cover your hair, because it's not so. However, God does reward people for things, but then again, you shouldn't do anything to receive a reward, just because you will receive a reward for something, You don't do it to receive rewards. You just do it out of your love of God and respect for God and respect for your husband and, your belief in God and your faith. It's not to really receive anything, If you receive something, that's nice. That's great. But that's not why we do things. We don't do them to win something. We don't do it for the prize at the end. The only prize that we do something for is eternal life. But like I said, covering your hair isn't what's going to win you eternal life. Your only thing that can do that is your faith and obedience. Judge for yourselves. So now you have to be convinced for yourself. Is it proper for a wife to pray to God with her head uncovered? You decide. Now he says, does not nature itself teach you that if a man wears long hair, it is a disgrace for him? It doesn't mean that the whole thing is about hair. However, it might mean that that's another thing that was going on. Maybe it's not so much that one thing means the other. Maybe both things were a problem, so now he discussed one thing, now he's going to discuss the other. Does not nature itself teach you that if a man wears long hair, it is a disgrace for him? See, so first he says, judge for yourselves. Is it proper for a wife to pray to God with her head uncovered? Now he's going to talk about something else. Does not nature itself teach you that if a man wears long hair, it is a disgrace for him? But if a woman has long hair, it is her glory. Now he wants to show you something. Your hair is your glory. Now, like I told you before, that's why the angels cover their glory. Because when they're in the presence of God, they cover their glory. And that's why it mentions this part right here. And because there's a verse, I guess I could go find it for you. I don't remember exactly where it is, but I think it's right there with the 10 Commandments. I think I read that in one of my videos too. It's right there with the 10 Commandments, and God says that he is a jealous God and he wants all the glory. Now that part's talking about false idols, but it still, regardless, says that he wants all the glory. That's why we cover our glory, to give God all the glory. But if a woman has long hair, it is her glory, for her hair is given to her for her covering, for a covering. Right? For her hair is given to her for a covering. Her hair is her glory for her husband to see. And that is her veil for him. That is her glory. That is her beauty. But she covers her beauty when she comes into the presence of the Lord, so that she can say, I give you the glory. That's what it means. I give you the glory. I honor you, Lord. I give it all to you. I don't want to focus on myself right now. I want to give you my glory. So it's a thing of submissiveness to the Lord. You're submitting to him when you cover your hair in his presence. You are giving him your glory, your all. You're saying, it's not about me, Lord. I cover myself in your presence and I give myself to you. That's what it means. Do you have to do it? Decide for yourself. But that's what it means. Don't let people, there's so many, people will teach things out there because they want to feel comfortable. When I was in college, I studied sociology. And one of the things that I never forgot being taught is that no one does anything that is not for selfish means. Whatever people do, they do it for selfish reasons. And that is true. Now, I'll tell you why and how that makes sense to me. I do this video for a selfish reason. I don't do it because I want attention from everybody. My selfish reason is because I love people. I'm a people person. And it saddens me to know that not everybody will go to heaven. And I'm selfish and I want to pull everybody with me. I do want to pull everybody into the boat. I want to pull everybody into the ark with me. I don't want to see people left behind. That's selfish of me. You see what I mean? But it's selfish in a good way. I love people and I don't want to be hurt. I don't want my heart to be hurt knowing that people are going to be left behind. So that's why it's selfish, because I do it for my own heart. It hurts my feelings to know that there are people out there that God just doesn't make sense to them and they're lost. And it hurts my heart to know that they don't see it that way, and that in my belief there is an afterlife and we're not all going to be in the same place. And so selfishly I want everybody to come along. And so that's why selfish reasons. If anyone is inclined to be contentious, so if you're going to argue about it, well, he says, we have no such practice. He just means they have no such practice as not covering their hair. Or some people say it means we have no such practice as arguing about such things. Nor do the churches of God. But the churches of God did have a practice of covering their hair. So it doesn't mean that the churches of God don't have a practice of covering their hair, when history and art history will show you that they did have a practice of covering their hair. So he's not saying that they don't have a practice of covering their hair, because that's not the case. They just don't have a practice of arguing about things. And their problem in this church was that they argued a lot. And they don't have that practice. In the other churches, they have more peace amongst themselves. And anyway, that's the end of my video. That's the last video I'm going to do on head covering. And it's not to make you guys think that you have to do something because I do. It's just because someone did ask me, and I thought, you know, it does need to be discussed, and in a better way than it does in the other videos that I've seen. They're very demanding. Some videos are even to the point of bullying their viewers. Some people do it for, you know, they make it so fast that they don't go through it thoroughly, and nothing can be taught about God that's not done thoroughly. You know, so much about out there is, you know, lights and action and entertainment, and I'm about, you know, getting back to the basics. I'm not here to entertain. I'm just here to help people understand who, you know, are new believers, and I'm here to study with people who want someone to study with. You know, I'm not here to say that I'm the ultimate authority on anything, but I just think that, you know, we need to get back to understanding. And there's a lot of people out there that are searching, and they're finding all these people who claim to be teachers who are just so, they're radical, or they're bullies. They don't explain things well, or they do it because they want money off of YouTube, or they want money off of Facebook, or they want popularity. And so it's all about giving people what they want to hear, because that's what people do. You know, they do look for stuff that they want to hear. They look for second, third opinions until they find something. That's why God mentions the itching ears. There's a verse where Jesus says that people look. Hold on a second. They say that people, you know, they have itching ears looking for someone to teach them what they want to hear. And I may not be here to teach you what you want to hear, but I'm just here to tell you what you need to hear, because it's important. And anyway, so I hope you guys all have a great rest of your Sabbath. Those who celebrate Saturday as Sabbath, the seventh day rest, that you rest in the Lord, but not just today, every day, because that's what Saturday is to teach you, the seventh day. That's what every festival is to teach you, how to live your life, not just to remember God one day, is to teach you to remember him all the time. So anyway, have a great rest of your weekend, everybody, and have a great week next week, and have a great everything. And I hope you enjoyed this video, and I hope you got something out of it. Anyway, so happy Sabbath and happy weekend. Shabbat Shalom, and I hope to hear from you all again, and I hope you all come back. All right, bye-bye.